Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing part 2. I didn't expect to be doing this video in multiple parts, but here we are. So part 2 of my spring clean declutter. Today we're going to be looking at decks that I have in my purgatory box, so decks that I'm definitely going to be rehoming, as well as a few that I'm kind of on the fence about. So we're going to take a look at them together and I'll kind of think about it, maybe talk through it and make a decision one way or the other. If you have not yet and you want to hear more about my sort of declutter process, you can check out the first video. I'll leave that linked for you in the description box below. So let's just go ahead and jump in. Here we have the Phantomwise Tarot. This one is still in its original box. I really tried with this deck. I wanted to like this deck. And it just, I edged mine in red, because if you know the book, the red makes sense if you know the book. Also the inside of the box, I think, was red. Yes, because again, the book. I really wanted to like this deck. And I think I showed it in a monthly wrap up because like I used it and me and this deck did not get along. And I joked that like it didn't like me and I didn't like it. And that's just, you know, I personify my decks. So that's just kind of part of the language that I use when I speak about my decks and how I interact with them and the kind of energies that they have. Most of what my issue with this deck is actually tactile and production quality. It is bowed already. And it says it's linen, but it feels like corduroy almost. And I cannot stand the sound that it makes when it shuffles. It's a real turnoff for me. And so I also find that the texturing on it, the kind of corduroy type texture makes the images for me very fuzzy and grainy and like they look blurry. And like I'm a designer by trade, so things like that really do bother me and will take me right out of the reading experience. Again, that's a very me thing. So as I stated in my first video on decluttering, everything that I'm going to talk about is all my experiences. Nothing is meant as an insult to a deck, a creator, a publisher, or anybody who has any association or experience or love for the deck. So again, these are just all my personal experiences. Forgot to do my disclaimer at the beginning, but I really wanted to like this deck, and I think that's part of the problem is my expectations for the deck were really high, and when it didn't quite hit it with the production value, I was really disappointed, and like the readings just didn't work out very well for me. And again, probably all of that ties into it. Just because I didn't care for the deck doesn't mean that I won't continue to read this author's works, because I do love her books, and if she creates another deck, I will probably give it a go. So that's the Phantomwise Tarot, which is going to be up for rehoming. Okay, so another deck, and I'm still, if you saw the first video, I'm still working on my same cup of hot cocoa, which is now more lukewarm cocoa at this point. But I wanted to just keep on rolling through so that we can go through all these decks. So this is the Ask the Witch, and I did a video. It was my cardstock rant. I don't often do rant videos, but occasionally it happens. And I so wanted to love this deck, but I could not get on with this deck because of the production choices, let's say, because it's not exactly a quality issue. It's a high quality deck. It comes in a nice top box. It has an outer box. It has a really nice guidebook, like really nice full color guidebook. This deck for me, it was just the production choices on it just made it a deck that I wasn't really able to physically work with. So it's larger than a standard tarot. It's very glossy. You can probably get it. I don't have any lights shining directly on my table. I really love the artwork though. Like, see, this is another one that every time I get this deck out, and it lives in my purgatory box. That's just where its home is. And then I get it out and I'm like, but I love the artwork. Like, I really do. And it's strange and it's weird and I don't know what's going on in half of these cards, but like, I so want to work with it. But every time I get it out, I just like, I guess now I flash back to that video I made and I'm just reminded at how how unusable this deck is. Like, look at this thing. It is a chunky monkey. It is on like, it's on full on cardboard. Like, it's got no real bend, no real give to it. Here's my issue. I can't shuffle it. I cannot get my hands around it very easily. And it doesn't really want to bend to even shuffle. And like, I don't know. Like, and it's just, it's so thick. And I want to work with it. I want to work with it. Let's pull 3 cards. Sometimes I like to do this. Okay. The 8 of Swords. Nope. Death. And the 4 of Swords. I mean, okay, so sometimes, I guess my declutter videos are also like, here's my thoughts on all things as well. Sometimes when I'm thinking about a deck like this where I'm like, I'm unsure, I will pull cards to see what the cards have to say. I mean, I do feel like this deck is kind of telling me it has some things to teach me if I would just like be patient with it. Like maybe I'm letting my limiting beliefs about this deck, like the tactile experience of the deck that's what's keeping me bound up and from being able to experience it. Like, I just need to let that go and maybe have a little bit of patience and work with this deck. So like, do I? Is it gonna go back in the purgatory box? I mean, maybe I need to just pull it out and actually just try working with it again. Sometimes my first experiences with the deck, if they're not positive, sometimes it's more of a reflection of where I am in my life and things going on, and I just need to like set the deck aside and you know, come back to it at a later date and see if it works better for me. That was the case. In the first video, I talked about this deck. This is the first deck that I showed in the video, and when I started, I was like, yep, this one's going. Because I had such an adverse reaction to it when I opened it the first time. And this last time in the last video, I went through it and I was like, oh wait, maybe I am ready for it. And so sometimes things like that change, and that's why I have a purgatory box and I don't just immediately rehome stuff. Because now here I am again going, I so like the artwork. I really want to work with it. So maybe I'll let it, maybe instead of having it in purgatory, I'll pull it back out and I'll give it a go again and see if I can make it work. And if not, that'll be my 3rd time trying with this deck. So if after the 3rd try, I'm still not like feeling it, then maybe at that point it'll be time to go. So I'll move it out of purgatory, put it on a shelf to work with and see how that goes before I ultimately decide. Okay, so let's talk about a deck that's definitely going, and this is absolutely nothing to do with this deck. It's absolutely one of my favorite decks. I have multiple copies of it. This is the Gentle Tarot Mini in a Tin. I was sent this deck by the creator, by Mari in the Sky, the tin version, as a prototype originally, and like, I don't know. I have it in the linen, which is my favorite. I had the first edition, which I did rehome because I always end up grabbing my linen edition. And for the most part, I still almost always grab my linen edition. And this is the beautiful finished version with the beautiful little accents on the back. Like, this is one of my favorite decks. But I don't need 2 copies in a tin. I backed this deck on Kickstarter, like even after I had the prototype and everything, to get a copy of the finished version in a tin and the full guidebook. And like, it's still one of my favorite decks, but I don't need 2 copies of it, like 2 pocket copies. And really, as funny as it is, like, I'm attached to my little prototype decks. That's the one I always grab for. So most of the time when I'm working with this deck, I'm working with the linen edition. I did go ahead and keep the stickers in there just because, again, I already have one of those as well. So again, this is just getting rehomed because I don't need 2 copies of it. Well, I mean, I have 2 copies of it, but I don't need 2 mini copies of it. I have my one that I love and I have my linen that I love, and that's plenty. So this one needs to find itself a new home. Okay, another deck that will be finding a new home is the Wild Offering Oracle. This one has artwork by Katie Daisy, and that's the reason that I bought it. But Katie Daisy now has one deck for sure, and I think the other one is either coming out this year or something with her artwork, and so I've purchased that instead. The backs are beautiful. I have her little How to Be a Wildflower one, and I will be getting the Moonflower one as well. I have edged this in like pastel pinks and yellows and blues and greens because this is a very colorful deck. It has really fantastic messages on it, and I did use this deck a lot. And it works for a really great sort of affirmation style oracle. There are occasionally language on this deck, like here it has a help me God to trust where you are guiding me. In my mind, when I come across cards like that, like God to me means spirit or source. I just kind of rephrase that in my head. But it is important to know, I think, when you're looking at decks like this, if there are references that might be uncomfortable for some people. So I definitely want to mention that. But like, this is such a beautiful affirmation deck, and I really, really enjoy it. But again, like I said, if I want this artwork, which is Katie Daisy, then I go to the deck that was created by Katie Daisy, which also has more cards. So the How to Be a Wildflower has 78, and this only has 52, which 52 is a great size for an oracle, don't get me wrong. And the messages are really nice, but I don't tend to use affirmation decks like this that often. And I do already have a few that that work for me. So I think it's, again, just time for this one to move on, because this is one that I purchased because I wanted this this artist's artwork in deck form, and then she came out with her own. So that's the Wild Offering Oracle. Okay, moving along. I have a vintage Morgan Greer Tarot in its original box here, which is, wow, really beat up. You might have seen this one if you watched my video I did on like decks that, like, classic tarot. I can't even remember what I called the video. Classic tarot decks that I just never got around to getting. This deck is real well used. I got it on eBay, and it does have its little booklet, and all the cards are here, but it is like, it's real beat up. I wanted to see the coloration of the vintage copy, which I do really like, but I'll be honest, most of the time when I work with the Morgan Greer, it's a deck that often lives in my living room, and so in the tin version. So most of the time I use the tin version of this deck because that's where it lives. But if I do want to use the bigger version, I don't know if like the cardstock is better on the newer version that I have, because I also have this newer at full size, just whatever the current release is from, you know, the current cardstock release. The colors are brighter on that one, and I actually like this deck being brighter. I think that's part of it. These are a little bit more muted, a little bit more washed out, which is generally a tone that I really like, but just not in this deck. Because this deck for me, I think because I worked with the more brighter, more newer edition, that's kind of the coloration that I kind of connected to and bonded with. And I really do love the Morgan Greer. It's like, it's up there in one of my favorite decks. But I just don't ever use this vintage copy. And like, it's just sad for it to sit in my collection unused. So anyway, it's just time for it to find itself a new home, where somebody will appreciate it more than I do. So that's the Morgan Greer Tarot, and it will be finding a new home. So the next deck is the Tarot of Plants. And I really thought that this deck was going to be like a thing for me. I really did. I picked it up at the trade table at the Northwest Tarot Symposium. I really like the artwork. But I find that this actually competes with my Spacious Tarot, or really the thing is that it doesn't, right? It has the same kind of really similar kind of planty aesthetic that is just really soft and gentle, and I really like it. It's very spacious as well. Like, I mean, I do love this card. It's really wonderful, but again, because I am already attached to and bonded with my Spacious Tarot, this one just kind of occupies the same space. So I picked it up, I gave it a try, and now it's time to move it along. So that's the Tarot of Plants. It's an indie deck, and it will be finding a new home. Okay, next, I have just two little Lenormands. This is the Rana George Lenormand. I do not have the original box, but I do have the little guidebook, and I've made a little bag for it. And this deck I have edged in gold also. This is a beautiful Lenormand. Like it's stunning. Oh, I think I still have it in order, so maybe I should keep it in order. But the thing is, I made my own Lenormand, and so if I want to work with Lenormand, I use my own deck, and like that's probably as it should be, right? The reason we make decks as tarot readers and whatnot is because there's a certain thing that we're trying to accomplish with the deck. So if I want to, you know, read with a Lenormand, I pull out my own deck most of the time. I do have a couple of other Lenormands that I keep, that I do also like to use, but like Lenormand, unlike tarot, right, isn't really dependent on the imagery. And so, you know, as we say in the community, like a tree is a tree is a tree. It doesn't matter how it's depicted. It means the same thing regardless. Whereas tarot and oracle is a little bit more subjective. Tarot has a definite structure, but you can be a bit more subjective in the artwork, whereas Lenormand doesn't really function that way. So I just don't need that many Lenormand. So I've kind of just taken it down to the handful that I really, really love. And then I'm basically rehoming the rest of them. So that's the Rana George Lenormand. The other Lenormand that I'm going to be rehoming is the Fairy Tale Lenormand. This one is mass market. The Rana George, I think, is mass market too, still available. This matches my nails. This is a cute little Lenormand deck. But again, I just don't need that many in my Lenormand collection. I have edged this one in green, just so you know. I put this one back in order too. This one's so cute. Like it's a Lisa Hunt artwork, which I absolutely adore. And I go back and forth on this one because like, oh, I love the artwork. But again, I don't read with Lenormand that often. I have a few others. And this one in particular kind of occupies the same space as the Celtic Lenormand, which is one that I did end up keeping because that one has such a great little guidebook. And I do like the cards and the artwork in it. But this one's beautiful too. But again, I just don't need that many Lenormand. So I'm rehoming the ones that just don't really get any use in my collection. So that one will be finding a new home. The Fairy Tale Lenormand. So another deck that we'll be looking for a new home is the Meraki Tarot. I apologize, I don't really know how to pronounce it. I do have the guidebook, and this I believe is the very first edition. Yeah, from 2020. This is a lovely deck. It's got a lovely box. It is rose petal finish. Here's the backs. It did come edged in this like. It's black. I think it's black, or it's almost like a really, really deep gray like this is. It has an extra card. It's a lovely deck. I do like that it has some associations on it, like astrological associations, which is cool. But again, it's just an art style that I have other decks that kind of compete with it in my collection. So I just don't ever find myself reaching for this one. Although, like, you know, it's a lovely little reader. It kind of is in the same vein as like I've mentioned with you know, several other decks now where it's like, it kind of sits in the same space as other decks that I'm already really bonded with. And so it's just never going to get play because I'm always going to be like pulling those other decks instead. Whereas this one just ends up just sitting on the shelf and being ignored. And it shouldn't be. It should be out and about and, you know, being used. So it's time for it to find itself a new home with somebody who will love and appreciate it. It's a gorgeously produced indie deck. I think there might be a second edition of this deck out, but this is the original first edition. And again, I have just the guidebook and the deck. Okay, so another deck that is going to be moving on in my collection merely because this is the indie and I have the mass market edition now. And like, I'll be perfectly honest, as beautifully produced as this deck is, I end up working with my mass market edition. It has the little guidebook. And I do have the full-size guidebook as well if anybody is interested. Here's the backs on the indie edition. I really do like the Guardian of the Night, but again, this cardstock is super slippy, and I actually prefer the design of the borders and the titles and stuff on the mass market edition. So I don't need 2 copies of it so the indie copy can find itself a new home. I'm sure there's people out there there who actually prefer the indie cardstock, because it is really slippy. So if you like a good slippy cardstock, like, it's really high quality. It feels beautiful in the hand, but because I have small hands and it's a larger deck, with this super slippy cardstock, it gets away from me and then I get frustrated. So I just end up using my mass market instead. So again, not a deck that I'm, getting rid of because there was, any issue with me using it. It's just I have the indie edition or the mass market edition, and I prefer that one. So that's the Guardian of the Night, and I do have the big separate guidebook too as well. Okay, so another deck and book set that I'm just like, I guess I'm finally ready to move on, because like I'm just not gonna work with it. This is the Wild Messengers Alchemical Tarot. Again, it's a beautifully produced indie deck, but it's another one that, as I mentioned with, I think it was in the first video, did I show you the backs? They're like textured, like scales, which is awesome. Beautifully produced deck. The backs are kind of slippy or shiny, but the fronts are matte, which is just makes for a really interesting tactile experience. It has some extra cards. Yes, I didn't keep them in order. This is a case where without a vast animal knowledge, this deck really doesn't do anything for me. And I'll be perfectly honest, I got the deck and book set to get the book primarily, because I was like, I heard really good things about it. It's very alchemical, and I thought that would be really interesting. But like, it's been years this thing has sat on my shelf, on my list of like, I'm gonna read the book and I'm gonna get around to it, and I'm just not. And really, if there's other decks that I do want to do deep dive studies with, more than this one. And like, here's the book, which is beautiful hardback book, and there's so much in here. I think of like, there's just so much information in here. That this would be a fantastic deck to do a deep dive with, especially if you were really into animals. And I'm just not. Like, I enjoy an animal deck, but not to the point where I want to actually do this whole deep dive work with it. So I'm ready to let this one go so that it can go to somebody who will, appreciate and use it for how it's meant to be used, rather than shoving it in a box like I do to say, oh yeah, I'll get to it. Because let's be honest, I'm not gonna. So that's the Wild Messengers Alchemical Tarot. Okay, we're getting down to the last few decks. Okay, so this one is the Macabre Tarot, which it's supposed to creak. Okay, so when you open this, it's supposed to creak. My box is, yeah, it's got some issues. I don't know if the battery is dying or what. It's super cute. Let me get the deck out. It comes with a little guidebook. And this deck, here's the backs. This deck is really cool. It's gold gilded. And like, it's a really creepy, cool, macabre kind of an energy. But again, we're back to that same, I have other decks that sit in this space for me that I'm always going to go to before I go to this one. It's kind of a pippy deck as well. So you'll see like, it's just got, just the tiniest bit of sort of story, I guess, in the illustration, but it is pretty pippy. Now, I don't mind a pip deck. I actually love a good pip deck. But the problem is, this is a very specific sort of vibe and energy. It's very, very macabre, very kind of in that goth sort of energy. And I have other decks that, like, when I want that energy, that's the deck I'm going for. And y'all know it's the Madame Lydia's, right? If I want that energy, that's the deck I'm going to go for, because I absolutely love that deck. This one is fun and cute and all of that good stuff, but I just don't work with decks like this often. And it's a very specific sort of energy for me. So this one just gets no love in my collection, because I have others that I just prefer instead. And again, it's a beautiful deck, but it's just not one that I prefer. So I'll put it in the box after, because again, the box is busted, and I don't know if it needs new batteries or what. Like, it works fine, but it makes a really annoying sound now. It no longer makes that creepy, cool, coffin opening sound, it just kind of stutters. So that is the Macabre Tarot, which we'll be looking for a new home. Okay, so another oracle deck that I am definitely going to be moving along is the Wild Kuan Yin Oracle. This is a beautiful oracle deck, and I really enjoyed my time with it, but I feel like it was like a time and a place, and I've moved on. And part of my sort of issue with this deck is that, again, it's another oracle deck that I'm a little bit beholden to the guidebook, because while some of these key phrases work fine, some of them I don't know what it's talking about. So, and I also am not a fan when decks do this. Like, be one way or the other, don't be both. Like, I'm fine. If you want to make a landscape deck, that's cool. Like, but make them all landscape, because it really throws me, especially if I'm trying to use multiple cards in a spread, when I get one that's going this way and one that's going this way, and I got to try to work my tarot around it. Again, that's just a preference, but there's actually quite a few in here. But like Grandmother Dragonfly holds the wisdom. I mean, you know, yeah, sure, I can make associations to that, but some of them is just like, it feels very tied into a specific idea, and without getting into the guidebook, I can't readily access that. Like the Snow Shepherdess. I mean, some of them are fine, but it does feel like it's kind of story, like it's tied into the story, and that's just really not how I work with my oracle decks in a general sense. So as beautiful as this deck is, I just found myself a little bit limited by the fact that the key phrases were kind of more tied into that sort of story energy, and I don't know, I don't have the time and space a lot of times to do that, and if I'm going to do that, it's probably not going to be with an oracle like this. Just because it's, you know, a different part of my practice. So anyway, again, it's a beautiful, beautiful oracle deck, but I do have the other Kuan Yin Oracle by, I think it's by Alana Fairchild, and I prefer that one to this one, but this one is really cool as well. So that one's definitely going to be looking for a new home. So another oracle deck that's going to be looking for a new home is the Secret Language of Light. This is by Denise Jarvie, and honestly, I bought this one because I love the write-ups that Denise Jarvie has in the, I think it's called Tarot of Light now, it used to be Art of Love. But again, we have that landscapey portrait thing, like make up your mind, be one or the other. I don't like when it does both. But I really like these images. Like I think they're really, really cool. But this is a case where I have other decks that sit in the same space that I just tend to be drawn to more. If I want this kind of sort of star-seedy energy, then I have oracle decks that I go to for that. If I want this sort of more cosmic, like this type of an energy, then I definitely have decks that I go to for that. I don't really care for the mix, I guess. I want it to be one or the other. And I think that's part of the problem with this deck. Not really a problem. Like if you just wanted one deck that kind of bridged the gap between that starseed and the more sort of universal consciousness type of energy, I don't know how else to explain that. I don't know, like here, like starseed, light worker, channeler type of a thing versus like more cosmic energy in the universal sort of almost real world sense. This is a great deck for that. But those are very specific energies that I actually do work with in my practice, and I do not intermingle with them. So when I want those specific types of energies, I have specific oracle decks that I will go to for that, as well as tarots. So while this is like a great sort of all-purpose in that sense, because this type of work is actually a big part of my practice, and I have very specific ways that I work with it, this kind of spanning the spectrum here doesn't really work very well for me personally. But I think the artwork is beautiful. The messages in the guidebook are really beautiful. It's just, again, I don't go to this one because I have others that kind of hit these two spots for me in ways that work within my practice. So here's the backs, which are absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful deck. It's just kind of sad because decks like this just, you know, sometimes don't find any space in my collection because I already have things that work for me. So that's the Secret Language of Light, which will be finding itself a new home. Okay, let's wrap up this video with a couple of, do I want to keep it or not? So this one is the Language of Flowers Oracle. I have several Oracle decks by Sherilyn Darcy, and on the whole, I really do like her Oracle decks. But here's the thing, I've got several of them, so I'm kind of at the point where like there's only so many Oracle decks that I need. And this deck, I really like the keywords. There are several keywords that are similar in her other decks. The art is really beautiful, but again, I have other decks that kind of sit in this same space, and I think at least one of them is by Sherilyn Darcy. So I was just kind of looking at them going, which of those do I like better? And I really do think I like the other one better. This has a very particular kind of energy. It's almost like cut wood, kind of. That's not the right phrase, but like it's like when you like cut out things and then kind of like it feels like it's cut and stamped and then painted over the top of, like, I'm sure that's not what it was done, but like that's what it reminds me of. And for me, sometimes this type of artwork can be a little bit chaotic, and like it can make me a little bit anxious. Like even just flipping through this deck on the whole, like I never use really more than one card in this deck, but just flipping through it on the whole, like it gives me a little bit of anxiety is not really the right word. Sorry, I'm having trouble finding my words today. It just, I don't know, it doesn't quite have this serene sort of energy that I want in a flower deck. Let's put it that way. I have edged it in this really pale pink to match the backs. But again, I think this one, I think it can go just because like I have several others, and the other one that I have that kind of sits in the same sort of light, springy, kind of pastel-y color way, which I believe is also by the same creator. I just like that one better. So I think I'm going to keep that one and go ahead and move this one along. Okay, so speaking of another deck that has that same sort of art style, this is the Celtic Healing Oracle. And like, I kind of feel bad. I think it's the green. I think it's the lime green that I can't with this deck. And it's interesting because it's Celtic and like it feels very ancestral Celtic. It's also very shiny, so very, very shiny. And it's got some really interesting things going on with it, but I just haven't found that it has a good place in my collection. It's really cool. The guidebook is really cool. And I think if you work with Celtic energy, I think this would be a really, really cool one to have, really interesting one to have. But that's not like a really something that I work with in depth and in a very intentional way. And really, and it does say the Healing Oracle. It is kind of geared a little bit towards that. And Celtic energy is not something that I work with in terms of my own personal healing work. So again, nothing against the deck. It's just doesn't fit really well into my collection. I'm just not a fan of this green. Like, I don't know. It's a color thing. But it's cool. I do like that it's black and white. That's really, really neat and interesting. I just kind of wish it wasn't the like lime green, but it's a really cool deck. But I think it needs to find another home because it just isn't, it isn't finding any space in my collection or in my practice. It does match my nails kind of though. So that's the Celtic Healing Oracle. Okay, so let's talk about another. Do I want to keep it? I have not had this deck for this long or for that long. This is obviously the Divine Animals Oracle by Stacey DeMarco. And I'll be perfectly honest, like, Stacey DeMarco decks, nothing against her decks or anything, they just don't work for me. Every time I buy one, I end up rehoming it, so I probably should stop. The backs are really cool. I love the sort of space, like I love this. This was cool. And there are some cards in here. I might even have them on top. I think I do, because I think I did a whole thing with my members with this deck. That I think, like, this is amazing. There are some cards in here. This is amazing. I do not like spiders, and I definitely do not like tarantulas, even though there is one that lives in my house. But the art, the way that this card is depicted is amazing. It's fantastic. I don't mind the turtle. It's the people. I don't like the people. If there were no people in this deck, I would be on board with it. I don't even mind this, where it's sort of the anthropomorphized, you know, the people body with the animal head. Don't mind that. That one's beautiful. That one's beautiful. All the ones that do not have people, I'm good with. But that is not the majority of the deck, unfortunately. And I don't like the weird... this one is fine, amazingly enough. It's the one people card in this deck that I don't mind. But like this, I don't know. I don't like it. To me, it feels like the peoples take away from the animals, and I do not understand why there are people in an animal oracle. To me, it takes away from the power of the animal. And so like if you just took the people out, I think it would work so much better for me. This one is fine, I guess, because the person is really, really small and insignificant. And I feel like when you're looking at an animal deck, the human energy should be really insignificant. It should be about the power of the animals themselves. Now, having said all that, I've not read the guidebook, so I could be totally talking out my butt, and maybe there's a point to it all, but that card kind of turns me off. I don't like it. But really, yeah, it's just the fact that there's people in this deck that I really don't care for. Like, this is just weird. Why is there a person swimming with the sharks who is like is she half a shark? Maybe she's a mermaid? I don't know. Yeah, I think it needs to go. I'm not going to work with it because there's too many people cards. And if I want to work with an animal oracle, I think I have other animal oracles. But again, animals aren't really a thing that I work with very often. And the animals that I do work with tend to be the anthropomorphized animals. So this just really isn't an energy that I think resonates for me. Like, this card would be amazing if that person wasn't there. So it's just, again, a personal preference. It's kind of a thing, a style with this creator. There's always they're very people-y oracles. Like, the people are always front and foremost, and then whatever the theme is seems to be the thing around it. And I think that's the thing that gets me. So yeah, I mean, it was very short-lived in my collection, but I think it just needs to go because there's just too many people for me. But it is it's a beautiful deck, right? So that's the Divine Animals Oracle. Okay, real quick, let's just touch base with the two decks that I was like, do I want to be, now that we're on to the second part of this. So the Goddess Temple Oracle, I guess I'm going to show it again because I'm still like, yeah, I feel like this had its time and its place. And, you know, maybe at some point if I end up diving real deep into Celtic work, that this might be something for me again. I did really enjoy working with it. I worked with it intentionally. I did a whole video on it, which was a really fun practice, and I did it for a while, but I feel like I've moved on from that and I'm into other things. Now, that's not to say that I won't come back to it, but as of this point, like, it's just not a practice that I'm really working with. And being a goddess sort of based oracle, like, I have lots of these now, and I have some that are more expansive and not so tied into a particular tradition, which I think I prefer. So I think at this point I am going to let this one go. So now that I've had another look at it, yep, I'm going to go ahead and put it up for rehome as well. That's the Goddess Temple Oracle. Okay, so the last deck that we're going to take a relook at is the Messages from the Spirits of Nature Oracle. I mentioned in the first video that this one I was thinking about rehoming just because I bought it as sort of inspiration when I was working on my own deck that isn't really about nature, but has a lot of nature cards in it. And yeah, I feel like this one is just, I've never actually worked with it, like as in used it in readings. I've only really looked through it. It was a little bit of like just for inspiration to try and inspire me while I was working on my own deck. And like, it was fine. I went through it. I looked through it, and I think I opened it with my members in a coffee and cards, and I really haven't touched it since. And I think it's just because honestly, if I want a deck like this, I'm going to go to my Earth Magic. And that's part of the thing too. Like I've talked about multiple times throughout these videos that a lot of times decks like this, when I have things that I'm already bonded to that are align, like I'm always going to go to that one instead. So I think this is a case of like, this is beautiful. It's a great deck. But if I want this earthy spirit energy, I'm either going to go to my Earth Magic, or like whenever I get mine printed, I'll use that instead. So I think that one can go ahead and go and find itself a new home, because like, again, it's not going to get used. It was kind of an interesting, just check it out, see what it's about, and then move on from there. So that is it. That is all the decks that were in my purgatory box. And I've tried to mention the ones that I'm going to be, I think the only two. Did I only keep two out? Look at me go. Okay, let's talk about those real quick. Okay, so the two that I decided to go ahead and hang on to, this Ask the Witch, oh my goodness, this deck, me and this deck, and the Trionfi della Luna, like the two decks that I was like, coming into this experience, I was like, yep, these decks are going. They're finding new homes. And then when I got them out and I looked through them, I'm like, oh wait, no wait, really? There's something here, and I want to explore them. So out of all of the decks that I've shared in these 2 videos now, because this took me 2 videos to get through, I've only got 2 that have come back out of the box that are ones that I want to like kind of give another go and work with and see how that's going to work. So pretty good. I only pulled back out 2. Now, as I mentioned in the first video, like these decks that have been sitting in my purgatory box have been sitting there for months, if not years in some case. So this is something that I'm trying not to be really impulsive about, because anytime I do impulsively cull my collection, I always end up regretting things and I end up repurchasing, which really doesn't serve anybody. So least of all, my deck buying budget. So these are decks that I've really sat with. I've kind of taken out of rotation for a really long time. They're different than the decks that I have in storage, because I do have 4 storage bins full of decks that are just not in current rotation right now, or decks that I'm just, you know, not working with, or they're just sentimental and like I'm keeping them just to keep them, and like I'm probably never going to use them, but I love them and I have them for whatever reason. That's the case with, you know, a big chunk of my collection, and then I have whatever's out in my office space is what I'm currently working with or is in rotation, along with decks that like just always live out. So yeah, that's my sort of experience and what I've come out of in this whole spring cleaning that I've done over the last couple weeks. Again, if you are interested in any of the decks that I mentioned I was going to rehome, not these 2, because these ones apparently are keepers again, but if you're interested in any of the other decks that I mentioned that I was going to rehome, I'll try to have a list in the description box. I will also have links for where you can purchase them new, in case buying somebody's, you know, old decks is not your cup of tea. That's totally cool, totally get it. Or in the case that maybe they might be gone or sold at that point, I'll leave a link for that in the description box below for you. So you can definitely check that out, and I'll have information about how to purchase anything that I am rehoming. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this second part of my spring cleaning declutter. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.